everyone. My name is Bhavya. I'm working as a lecturer in Gupta College, Bangalore. Today we are here to discuss about our business studies, how the question paper will be and how we need to study, what are all the things that are important, which is very importantly we need to understand by this time. The reason behind this is we are in a month of March. Our very next month we have to crack our exam, which is very importantly we need to know what to study and what not to. So we'll move on to that and we'll discuss in this session. Exam will be nice to you only if you're nice to your studies. In our question paper, total 185 marks questions will be there. Out of it, 165 from all the chapters, the questions, understanding level, knowledge level, and all those stuffs, and other 20 marks, which will be covered up with your PUC, practical oriented questions. Overall, 185 marks questions will be there on our question paper. Let's understand how the paper pattern would be. 1 mark, 10 questions you need to attend, but 15 questions will be there. When it comes to 2 mark, you need to attend again 10 questions, but you have a 15 questions over there. You have a choice of 5. Next, 4 mark, you need to attend 7, but there are 14 questions. Luckily, you're getting a 50% extra over here. Again, in the 8 mark, things would be the same. 8 into 4, you have to attend 32 marks, but again, 8 questions will be there in this section D. When it goes to section E, there are 4 POQs will be there that you have to attend only 2. Part 1 consisting, 2 will be come from part 1, part 2, there are 2 questions will come from POQ section. Let's understand the syllabus for PU2 now. Part 1, part 2, you have 2 textbooks. Part 1 consisting of your principles and functions of management, and part 2 consisting of your finance and marketing and also consumer protection. So let's understand the chapter-wise marks distribution, how things are there. Part 1 textbook itself, 109 marks questions carrying over there in the question paper. Goes to chapter number 1, overall 15 marks questions will be there. Chapter number 2, 10 marks questions. Chapter number 3, 9 mark questions. Chapter number 4, again 10 mark. Chapter number 5, 19 marks, where we have to give more importance over here because 2 8-mark questions will become from your chapter number 5. And one more thing I have to mention over here, in this chapter 5, only 3 questions are there in your question bank for 8 mark. Out of 3, 2 you can expect over here. So which is very important, you have to study this chapter. And goes to chapter number 6, again 16 marks. Chapter number 7, 19 marks, again 2 questions per 8 mark sections. Chapter number 8, 11 marks. A total overall 109 marks will come from your part 1. Goes to part 2, 56 total marks will come from part 2. Chapter number 9 consisting 11 marks. Chapter number 10, 15 marks. Again, chapter number 10, 1 8-mark question will be there, and as well as 11 also 1 8-mark question. But 4 mark 2 will be there in your chapter number 11, where it's 21. And generally you can write this marketing chapter easily, you can understand. So have to opt this chapter number 11. Goes to chapter number 12, again 9 marks will come from that chapter. So overall, even part 1 and part 2, it's a total of 185 marks. Even you can pass only if you study part 1 also. We'll think about, we'll check it out, how we have to study planningly. So we move on to chapter number 1, nature and significance of management. How things will work out here. You see section A, 1 mark, 1 question will comes over there. And 2 mark, 1 question will be there. 4 mark, 1 question, and then 8 mark, 1 question. Previously we didn't have 4 mark question, but now in this model where we have started getting more of a lot of choices over here, 4 mark added over here, you have to concentrate. And from this chapter, POQ would be levels of management. As we all know, there are 3 levels of management which you have to draw very neatly. The diagram which you can see, a triangle 1, a top level management, middle level management, and operational level management. Goes to top level, the examples you have to write, otherwise you will only ended up with 3 mark. So you have to write examples over there. Top management, maybe CEO or board of directors you can write. Comes to mid-level management, you can write down any of the manager. Either it would be a finance manager, or it would be a marketing manager, or just go on production manager, or whoever it is. Comes to operation level, you can write it down as a foreman, inspector, and all. If you written only this much, you will get your 5 marks over here. So when it goes to important questions from your chapter number 1, I'll just cover up only 4 mark and 8 mark over here. Apart from this, what do you mean by effectiveness, concern with, or efficiency? Those are all the repeated questions from chapter number 1 for 1 mark. And second 2 mark, you can cover up with your some definition of your coordination and management. So let me go with the 4 mark where we have to give more importance. Explain the objectives of management. As we all know, there are 3 objectives are there: organizational objective, a personal objective, and social objectives. You have to cover up with the organizational objective. The elements are there, maybe a growth, survival, and profit, that you have to mention over there. Next, you should talk about the importance of management. As we all know, the importance of management, where and all it would be important. It has to cover up some of the grounds over there. Maybe as we all understood in our, it helps in achieving group goals, or maybe efficiency, increases the efficiency, and many more things, maybe a dynamic, all those stuffs. Next, it would be a characteristics of management. And also 4 mark management is a profession is there. Maybe it's something called entry restriction, and all those stuffs you have to cover up over there. Comes to characteristics of management, this is your 8 mark question. There are 7 characteristics are there. In that one, where you will mention that management is a multi-dimensional, there you have to cover up the 3 other points over there: management of people, management of work, and management of operation. These 3 you have to cover up over there. Then you will get your full 8 mark. No need of writing any meaning and all those things over there. You have to write all the 7 characteristics. When it comes to multi-dimensional, you have to mention those 3 dimensions. Then you will get your full 8 mark over there. Then next question, management as an art and science. You just prove it or elucidate. You will get justify and all those stuff. It's something called you have to wait. You have to mention your conclusion over there. What exactly this art and science? You have to take up what are all the characteristics of art and what are all the characteristics of science. 3 points here and 3 points there you have to mention, and then you have to give the conclusion. The management is fulfilling the above characteristic of art and above characteristic of science. Once you give the justification, you have to conclude that yes, both are management is both art and as well as science. It's always a complement to each other. So you have to write it down with 3 points of art and 3 points of science. Yes, dear students, you have to write it down. This is the way how we can prove that science management is both art and science. Next, we'll move on to the next question. That's a coordination. This will come for your definition because characteristics we have only 6. So you have to write down what do you mean by, define coordination. Definition you have to write, and you should take up the characteristics over there. Maybe it integrates group effort, or maybe unity of action. All these points you have to cover over here, and then you should write it down clear, briefly about your characteristics of your coordination. What I mentioned, that coordination and as well as science and art, management is both art and science. When they will choose the difficulty level questions, they'll take up these 2 questions. Otherwise, they'll go with the characteristics of management or whatever I'm going to talk in the further next one. Interrelated. Management is a series of continuous interrelated functions. Yes, this and the first question what I have discussed, characteristic, both will be comes under your easy questions. But science and as well as art and also the coordination, which they will pick it up when they are going to choose the difficult question from chapter number 1. Yes. Management is series of continuous interrelated functions. We all know the functions of management. Maybe it starts with the planning and ended with the controlling. Planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling. One and the other function is interrelated to each other. It's not that without one function we can run the business or we can run the things. No, definitely it's highly impossible. So always one function is interrelated to the other function. So that is what all about your chapter number 1. 4 questions are there with your what I have mentioned, 8 mark questions over here. So one, definitely you can expect, if they are choosing a easy question from this chapter, you can expect first question or a last question. If they are choosing for a difficult level, obviously you can expect the question from art and science. So I'll move on to the next chapter now. Principles of management, chapter number 2. Chapter number 2, it covers 10 marks from this chapter, 2 mark 1 question, and then sorry, 1 mark two questions, and 2 mark 2 questions, 4 mark 1 question will come from principles of management. As we all know from this chapter, there is a PUC where you have to mention 10 FIOS principles over here. As we all know, unity of command, unity of directions, or scalar chain, or maybe what is it, remuneration of employees, mark 1 questions here. So to overall 10 marks come from this chapter. And let's see what's the POQ from this chapter. We have to mention 5 10 principles over here. As we all know, unity of direction, unity of command, discipline, order, equity, scalar chain, remuneration of employees, and then stability of personnel, and Esprit de Corps, are many more. These, out of these 14, you have to mention any of the 10 principles over here. Each principle carries half mark. You cannot do any mistake, even though with the spelling, then you won't get your full mark over here. So you have to be very careful with while writing your principles of management. 14 principles of 5 principles of management. Let's see what all the questions are important over here for 4 mark. One question you will get significance of principles of management. The other one you will get FIOS, FW Taylor's principles. That's a scientific principles. Questions can be asked in the two, either the way. One, they will ask you directly the scientific principles of management. The other question they may ask you what has been contributed by FW Taylor. So you have to write it down. Maybe a science is not rule of thumb, cooperation not individualism, coordination is a harmony not discord, development of each and every personnel. This you can write and you can explain to this. Apart from this, you also can expect one more question from this chapter, aspects of work study. As we all know, which is very important, which is given by your Taylor. Work study consisting of all other 4 different studies over here: motion study, fatigue study, time study, and method study. You have to explain. If you explain these 4 studies over here, you will get your full 4 mark here. Yes. Next, we'll look into our chapter number 3, business environment. Overall 9 marks questions will come from this chapter. 1 mark 1 question, and then 4 mark 2 questions you will get over here. And apart from this, POQ is a very easy one over here. You have to draw a circle and make a 5 part over here, and then 5 dimensions or elements. They may ask you either elements of business environment, or they can also ask the external forces of business environment, or maybe a dimensions. So have to write all the 5 dimensions over here: economic environment, political environment, legal environment, technological environment, and political. So have to mention all these 5 business environment dimensions over here. Let's see what are the important questions from this chapter. As we all know, 4 features of your business environment, which is very, very important. Maybe totality of external forces, specific and general forces, or maybe interrelatedness, uncertainty, complexity, any 4 you choose. See, while you're studying itself, you plan and study, because this chapter only carries 4 marks. Out of 7 points, you can study only 4 points which you feel comfortable. So only those 4 points you have to explain over here. Apart from that, you have to write down any 4 points to explain how it is important. That means importance of your business environment. As we all know, firm to identify opportunities and getting the first mover advantage, or maybe helps in coping with changes, or maybe helps in improving performance. Many more are there. You just learn any 4 points and then you can go ahead. Apart from that, the last question, any 4 challenges that were to be faced by the business. Maybe, as we all know, increasing competition, day by day competition will be keep increasing. It's external force, right? So that we have to speak. Increase in demand also will affect, and necessity and modification of operations. Many more points. You have to learn any 4 out of these points, and then you have to prepare for your exam. This is with respect to your chapter number 3. Let's understand the chapter number 4, how things will come. Here again 2 mark question 1 will be there, and then 2 mark question, so 1 mark question 2 will be there, 2 mark question 2 will be there, and 4 mark 1 question will be there. So you no need of studying anything for 8 marks in the planning. So stop, plan properly and then you study. Planning process is there, guys. That is your POQ. When you will learn planning process, you learn any 4 points thoroughly for the explanation. Why? Because in this chapter there is no 8 mark question, right? So obviously they can ask, even if it comes for POQ, you have to write all the 7 steps. If it comes for your 4 mark, they will ask you first 4 steps you have to explain. So obviously first 4 steps you have to thoroughly prepare for this in this chapter. So as we all know that setting objectives, I'm talking about the POQ, how the process would be, the planning process, setting objectives, developing premises, and evaluating, identifying alternative course of action, then evaluating alternative course of action, then select a plan, then implement it, and then follow up action. Next, importance of planning is there. Maybe it provides this direction, reduces risk of uncertainty, or maybe it helps us to decision making, many more things. See, 4 features of planning and limitations, which is very important for you guys. They may cover up with the 2 mark question as well. I mean, mention any 2 or state any 2 features of planning, state any 2 limitations. Limitations, most of the time you will get it for 4 mark. So you have to be prepared for features and limitations very importantly. So let's understand those things now. Planning leads to rigidity. I'm talking about limitations, and then it may not work in dynamic function, and it's very huge cost it will be involving, and it will be what to say that it reduces the creativity. These are all your limitations of planning. And then last question is any 2 types of plans they'll ask you. As we all know, if they ask you 2 types of plans, don't take up that standing plan and single use plan. You have to write any 2 plans. There are many examples for your standing plan and single use. Single use means budget. Once we use that budget, we are not going to carry the same budget for next year. We're going to do a new budget, right? All those would be example for standing and single use. Any 2 plan you take, all the 8 will be considered as a plan. Objectives, strategies, methods, policies, procedures, all those things, project. So any 2 you thoroughly prepare and you go and write down. That will be gives you 4 marks over there. So next we'll discuss about chapter number 5, organizing, which is very, very important for you all. Why? Because 2 8 mark questions are here from this chapter, and 1 mark 1 question and 2 mark 1 question will be there. There is no 4 mark question from this chapter. And my suggestion would be you have to study this chapter. The reason behind this is in our PU board question bank, there are only 3 questions from this chapter. I don't think they'll give you different questions apart from the question bank. So out of 3 questions, you will get 2 questions maybe. So you have to study all the 3 what is given on your question bank. Let's see what are those questions now. And from this chapter, POQ would be you have to draw the chart. Chart will be which shows divisional and as well as functional. Don't get confused and don't draw a huge chart over there. You just mention managing director, 3 division you take, any 3 division. Maybe you will take it as a footwear, or maybe you will take it as automobile, or you will take it as textile. These 3 you take, and below that you just any one you opt out of these 3 division, 1 division you choose. Below that you mention the functions. We all know, right? Many functions are there in our organization. HR is there, marketing is there, finance is there, production is there, knowledge management is there, many research and development is there. Anything which you like to write, any 3 function you write it down. You will get your full 5 marks. So let's see what are all those questions. As I mentioned, there's no 4 mark question from this chapter, only 8 marks. So here you have to understand the explain the importance of organizing, importance of how organizing is important in the organization, which is very, very important for you all. You have to take up this and you have to explain. It facilitates growth, as we all know. Benefits of specialization, clarity in working relationship are very important, guys. Say when you go through this importance of organizing, you write down the meaning of organizing and take up the importance. You start explaining the importance of effective administration, expansion and growth. You can explain all these points over here. Next, state the advantages and disadvantages of a formal organization. As we all know how it would be very important for the organization. What are the benefits we get out of formal organization? A formal organization will have a better clarity in a working relationship, and things will get in time, things will be done within the time. And disadvantages, maybe you can say procedural delays, because everything should go through, you cannot bypass, right? So procedural delays, many disadvantages are there. So you have to study this formal organization, advantages and disadvantages. Thirdly, decentralization, meaning you have to write it down and its importance. Decentralization means you're dispersing the authority towards your subordinates. You're giving authority to subordinates to take up the routine decisions. So that you have to consider, that you have to write in your paper the decentralization meaning, and you have to write the importance of it. Next chapter we'll discuss about our chapter number 6, staffing. What are the questions we'll get it from this chapter? We'll get somewhere around 16 marks from this chapter. 1 mark 2 questions, 2 mark 1 question, 4 mark 1 question, and then 8 mark 1 question. We discuss PUC question from this chapter would be sources of recruitment. Any 10 sources you have to mention, internal and external sources. We know internal sources, transfer and promotion. Within our organization, what are the employees we have? For those people, we are transferring from one place to another place and giving promotion to them, moving it to our next position, and we are filling that position. So those things you have to write it down. So when it comes to external sources of recruitment, maybe a campus recruitment, or maybe direct recruitment, or maybe your labor contractors, or many more. You have to write those. Any 8 from there and 2 from here. Total 10 you have to write it down from both internal and external. So you'll get your 5 marks for this POQ. Next, let's see what are the important questions from this chapter. First thing, explain any 4 types of tests used for selection of employees. You all know that interest test, a trade test, and many more. You have to go through that and explain it, which will be comes under your selection test, which is a second step in your selection process. The next one, explain the internal sources of recruitment. There are 2 sources are there in internal sources. One is promotion, the other one is transfer. You should talk about those 2. Next thing would be how training and development would benefits to the organization. Many ways, it will speed up the work and it will give you more efficiency, it will enhances the productivity. Those things you have to explain over here. Out of these 3 questions, you will get 1 for 4 mark. Next, we need to understand the staffing process. As we all know, in this process, when we say or when we talk about the process, it should be in order, guys. You cannot jumble it over here. If you jumble it, it never gives your meaning. So when it comes to a process, always you should think in your mind, you should keep it in your mind. I have to write it in the same order which is given on our textbook. So starting process, you have to write down all there are more than 8 steps given in the textbook. You just go through only first 8 step is also fine with the things. If you know all the 11, you write it down in the beginning and then you explain any 8. Next thing would be a selection process. As we all know, in the selection process, again, we have 8 steps over there. Maybe it starts with a preliminary screening, then selection test is there. Again, under selection test, 4 tests or 5 tests are there. But you don't keep elaborating those tests over here. If you're going to do that, you cannot complete your remaining 6 steps over there. So just to the point, you write it down 1.5 line, then go through your third one, maybe your employment interview, or maybe your background verification. All those steps will be keep on moving. So you have to write it down in the through order only. Next thing would be 4 methods of on the job and off the job. 4 from on the job you have to write, 4 from off the job you have to explain in on the job, and 4 methods of off the job training. When it goes to on the job, maybe a job rotation, apprenticeship training, and all those steps. When it comes to off the job, you can offer classroom training, vestibule training, and computer modeling and all. So I have to explain any 4 from on the job, any 4 from off the job. If you have written only all the 8 from on the job or 6 from off the job, you never get your full mark. So always you make sure that you are writing 4 from on the job and 4 from off the job. So you'll get your full 8 mark over there. And then next last question from this chapter, how that training and development will benefit the organization and as well as to the employees. To make sure that 4 points from the organization benefit and 4 points to the employees, you have to mix and you have to write it down. Only one if you have written, only half a mark you will get it over there. So how it is benefit training and development, it enhances the productivity, and then for the employees it speed up, or maybe knowledge and skill will get improved. Many ways are there. So these are all the things you have to explain in the chapter number 6, starting the training and development, how it would be beneficial to the organization and as well as employees. Next, we'll move on to directing, which is the easiest chapter if you ask with me, because it's very easy to understand and as well as to write in the paper. Why? Because maybe your qualities of a good leader that you can direct easily, you can write it down. Maybe financial and non-financial benefits, which is very easy to understand. We'll understand how many questions are there from this chapter. There are, as we all know, directing it will give you 8 mark. 2 questions will come from this chapter. 1 mark 1 question, 2 mark 1 question, total 19 marks from this chapter, and then you have to write it down. See, POQ, which covers with the Maslow's need hierarchy theory. As we all know, you have to draw a triangle over here, make a 5 part of the triangle. You have to write from the below. That's a basic. I mean, from the below, you have to start writing the needs over here. First one, basic needs. If you don't know the spelling for physiological needs, you just don't get confused. You write it down as a basic needs. Basic needs would be of food and shelter. So if you know the spelling, you just write it down. Advanced is physiological needs. Second one would be, it will be a safety one. Safety would be your pension or maybe your basic pay and all those stuffs. When it comes to a third one, it would be a social need, social. That would be your love, affection, or maybe friendship and all those steps. Fourth, it would be your self growth. Self growth would be example for your self actualization. Fifth one would be self actualization needs. There it would be your development of yours. All these 5 you have to write along with your some of the examples, 1 or 2 examples. This is what your PUC of Maslow's need hierarchy. We'll move on to the chapter important questions from this chapter. As we all know, what is supervision, and explain the role played by a supervisor. We all know that 8 roles which is mentioned by the supervisors in the textbook that you have to go through. You cannot ignore that role played by a supervisor because there is no main points over here. Most of the student will ignore this question. Why? Because there is no main points, ma'am. I don't remember this huge lines over here, 2 lines, 3 lines. I can't remember. No, you cannot do that. It's easy to write by you. If you once you understand, you can write by your own, guys. So always make sure that you always study this supervision roles which is played by a supervisor. You have to be. Next thing would be any for financial incentive and any for non-financial incentives. For financial incentives would be your basic pay linked with your basic pay, bonus, or maybe a stock option you can take it, or maybe your retirement benefits, which can be given through our money, which can be measured through money. That would be financial incentives. And non-financial incentives, that would be your status or maybe your prestigious things, which will give you a satisfaction. That would be job satisfaction, job enrichment. All this comes under your non-financial incentives, which is very good. I mean, easily you can write it down on the exam, guys. So 4.4 plus 4. If you understand at least for some of the point, I cannot be able to explain, ma'am. Okay, you write down the points, 4 from here, 4 from there. You will get 4 mark over here, even though you are not going to explain the things, which is very important. You should learn. Next, qualities of a good leader. Generally, if we think, you see, you have a lot of traits. 18,000 traits are there to call a person as a good leader. At the same time, all 18,000 traits will be there with the one person, highly impossible. So you can consider other things, some of the few things which is there commonly with most of the leaders that you can take. Maybe a communication skill, social skills, or maybe a physical feature. All these things you can consider. Integrity should be there. He should be very honest with the people who are working under him, subordinates. So integrity is very important for him. A communication skill is very important. Motivational skill is very important for a good leader. All these would be considered as the qualities of a good leader. So 9 qualities which is mentioned on your textbook. Go through any of the 8 qualities and you explain those qualities in 3 and offline. Quality, quantity, both are important, guys. Don't ignore. You have to write down this. Next, suitable measures to improve communication effectiveness. As we all know, communication is the biggest problem in this world. As we all understood, US association has clearly mentioned communication is the biggest problem in this world. So always you have to make sure that what measures we can take to overcome from this problem. So how, when our communication will be effective, when our tone will be perfect, when your language, usage of language will be perfect, by the time your communication will be very effective. When you are understanding your listeners, that will be very important. So by the time your communication will be very effective, you need to understand the values of your listeners, and you should be have a patience to listen to them. You should be a good listener. All these would be where you can improve your communication, where you can make very much effective over there. So these, out of these 4 questions, you will get 2 questions in your question paper. So better you just go through these things, guys. And also one more thing, principles of directing last 3 to 3 years before, only in one question paper it had come. Principles of directing, you can add that and you can study that. For centum students, make sure that it may come. So next we'll move on to our last chapter from part 1, that would be a controlling. In the controlling, again, you will get 11 mark questions from this. 1 mark 1, 2 mark 1, and 4 mark 2 questions. You will get it over here. And in this chapter, PUC is a very easy one. They will ask you modern techniques of controlling. As we all know, ROI, return on investment, or maybe your what is that, MIS, PERT and CPM. These are all your management auditing. All these would be comes under your modern techniques of controlling. So you make sure that you have learned that one, because POQs first part, if you learn all the 8 POQs, it will cover up in your question paper. Out of these 8, 2 will come. If you're going to ignore the part 2, still you can manage with the POQs. So please learn all the 8 POQs from the part 1. Let's see what are the important questions from this chapter. A good control system helps an organization in many ways. It means that they're asking your question indirectly, the importance of controlling. So you have to write down the answer of importance of controlling to this first question. Next would be a limitations of controlling. Again, this is for 4 mark. And relationship between controlling and the planning and controlling. There you have to talk about what's the difference between maybe relationship between planning and controlling. Planning would be a forward looking, controlling would be a backward looking. Whatever the plan will say is that control, at the controlling we have to see that as things has been done or what. And apart from that controlling process, there are 4 steps are there. Okay, explain on what is it, procedure. You have to follow the chronological order over there. It should be in the same order which is given in your textbook. So this would be our controlling process. I think with this we have understood how questions will come in our question paper from the part 1 textbook. As I already told you guys, most of the things, 98 to 100 marks will cover up from your part 1. You can easily pass your exam. So don't ignore or don't show your negligence over here. Please try to understand what to study and what need to be kept in our mind at the time of examination, what I need to write it on a paper. See, even though sometimes if you don't know to explain the things, at least try to write down the points over there. You know, maybe you know all the 6 points. You may forget 2 points. It's okay, you don't worry. 6 points, if you mention 3 marks, maybe definitely it matters, right? Where you will be a shortage of 1 mark or 2 marks. You just write it down what you know in the paper. Don't waste your time in the examination. I think we'll discuss the part 2 quite later. Thank you so much.